Hello and welcome. Another edition of Thursday's Coach's Corner, where each and every Thursday, Coach Serrano, who is going to be rejoining us next week after his fall season at Johnson University, we get to talk to college coaches all across the country, all levels, all divisions. This week, we're going to get an opportunity to come up my neck of the woods into the greater Northeast New England area, University of Connecticut baseball. We have the recruiting coordinator / pitching coach, Josh MacDonald. Josh, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me.
I absolutely am looking forward to this. And one look at your schedule, a lot of parents want to talk about the SEC, the P4, the ACC, the Big 12, Big 10, et cetera. Big East baseball, since I was a kid, and Andy Blaylock was the head coach at UConn, has always been a kind of perennial regional caliber program. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about not only Big East, but UConn baseball. You've been there now, was it 12 years, 13 years?
14. This is my 14th.
Woo, mama. You've been there a long time. So talk
Yeah.
a little bit about UConn baseball. And, during your stay, they're becoming Pitcher University. So share a little inside scoop on UConn baseball.
Yeah. Well, UConn baseball, like you said, for as long as obviously I've been around, and before that has always been, one of the best programs, if not the top program in New England or the Northeast. And I think, like you said earlier, Big East baseball has always been a tough conference. And if you're going to play baseball in the Northeast, you're going to have to probably be pretty tough in general. So I think a lot of those teams in this area and in our league, that's probably the characteristic we all share, is that it's going to be a tough weekend. There's not going to be any cakewalks. Because you're not just probably going to have to go up against obviously good competition, but you're going to have to go up against kids that really like to play, and sometimes where the weather may not be so nice and friendly to you as well. In terms of our schedule and where we are now is, UConn, especially I would say the last 2 decades, we've really continued to build this program. We've had a lot of support from our school, our administration. We now have a brand new stadium that was finished in 2020. That's state of the art and beautiful. That we've also built this program up where we can't just have a regional schedule anymore. We have to have a national schedule if we want to continue to go to regionals and go to super regionals. I think that the schedule this year, we may have bit off a little bit more than we could chew. But even if you look at last year's schedule, it was really difficult. We did not start off great. But we have to play teams of that caliber. So when you see them, when you see them in early June, you can't be intimidated by the crowd. You can't be intimidated by the level of play. It has to be something that you've gone up against enough that, there's no shock to your system. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's what we're trying to do every single year. And with RPI being, one of the main components to get into the NCAA tournament, one of the ways that you can rack up RPI points, if you're not in one of these, Power 4, Power 3, whatever conferences you want to call them now, is you got to go on the road and play them. And if you go on the road and play them and, you play, near 500 or slightly above, you're going to be in pretty good shape as long as you take care of business in your conference.
Well, I mean, I just want parents to understand that, UConn, in our part of the country, you have, obviously Boston College, UMaine, Orono, you have Central Connecticut, you have a really strong group in Northeastern University now. I don't want, obviously, the Ivy Leagues, Penn, Brown, et cetera, Harvard, Yale. But when we start looking at your schedule, Josh, you're playing the Vanderbilts, UCLA, USC, Miami, Campbell. I mean, right out of the gate, you're talking about perennial top 20 programs year in and year out. I want you to talk a little bit about that caliber of athlete that you kind of alluded to, that mentally tough, physically tough athlete that tends to find their way there. And guys like George Springer, Nick Ahmad, Matt Barnes. I mean, UConn year in and year out always has at least a draft pick or two on that roster. But it's a mentally tough type of athlete that you're looking for when you're talking about UConn Husky baseball.
Yeah, I think that the one thing that we've been able to kind of not change, but we've been able to get into more living rooms, or Zoom calls, or text message, whatever you want to call it. We've been able to talk to more guys of a higher caliber, again, probably over the last 10 years or so, after George and Nick and Barnes. Those guys kind of came through, and really is, the guys that tend to come here, they're really good baseball players. That, it's probably the same reason why a kid from Oklahoma chooses Oklahoma State over, let's say UNC or UVA. It's kids that want to stay, really good baseball players that, for the most part, want to play baseball within, 3 to 4 hours of their parents,
right,
and their family. And, they like the idea of being able to go home and get a home cooked meal, and dad to be able to come up and watch them, play on a Wednesday. I mean, that, we're just trying to get, really the best players from that area. I think because of the fact that we've been able to make the NCAAs and get on TV and ESPN more, we've been able to branch out a little bit too. And, we've been able to go out to, the West Coast and some other areas for junior college players. And I think we got our first kids from Texas, maybe ever. I think we got 2 kids from Texas here to come in. So that's the thing. We've been able to really we always focus on the Northeast kids first. Our main focus is try to get the best kids from Connecticut first, and we try to supplement the roster with players from outside the area that we know has the talent to go up and play against, like you said, the Vanderbilts of the world, the Miamis of the world, because that's who we're going to play. Right. I mean, that's who's on the schedule. We are not going to duck anyone. And I think the one thing that's been pretty cool, you said, hey, we're playing top 20, opponents. We're a top 20 opponent now. I mean, that's
exactly
that's the thing. We are at the point now where we, I think we were just ranked 26 in D1 baseball's, top programs, and that's kind of a how they do their measurements. I'm not exactly sure, but in terms of where we are, and we consider ourselves definitely in that caliber. And I will tell you, we're going to go out and play the best. The best do not always want to play us. We love that Vanderbilt. They're one of the SEC schools that do want to play us, but there have been a few that we've reached out to, and they do not want to play us. So that lets us know too that we're probably doing something pretty good when the quote unquote top do not want to play us out of conference. That's pretty neat.
Well, one of the topics that I want to discuss with you, because I try to get parents to understand this dynamic, but it came to a head last year in your super regional against Florida State. UConn had a substantial amount of NCAA Division III transfer students, and without going too deep down the portal rabbit hole, we in New England have a large contingency of Division III baseball schools and a lot of talented athletes there. Can you talk a little bit about, it's not where you start. It could be out of high school. It could be out of a JUCO. It could be out of a Division III or Division I program. But there are opportunities for the athletes that start their journey at Division III and find their way to a UConn Husky baseball program.
Yeah, or really any program. You're right. New England, the one thing that we have in New England is that we have really great Division III programs. We don't have a giant contingency of junior colleges around here. We don't have NAIA schools around here. So what we do have are D2 and D3, but the D3s are super strong because of the academics of New England. A lot of really good academic schools, so kids that may not be able to get into Yale or the BCs of the world or Northeasterns or Holy Cross, whatever, they're going to end up in the NESCAC or at an Endicott or at Babson. So you have, you really have a really large contingency of players that tend to be very smart, and with coaches that are very good. Wheaton has an A+ program, and obviously I just said Endicott. So because of that, and because of the fact that we know though that, and we know the kind of players that these kids are getting, and because we have to go kind of follow our guys around the summer ball, it's not hard for us to see that, hey, what, Stephen Quigley, who was started off as a shortstop at Wheaton, here and he's throwing 92, 93 and can really pitch. So when COVID happened, the one thing that they did provide these kids is that D3 kids all got 2 extra years.
Right.
So it wasn't even so much a situation where we were going and, plucking, let's say, a D3 kid going into his draft year. For the most part, they were all kids that graduated that were looking for a higher level of play. And, a lot of these kids just kind of landed in our laps, either because they were from Connecticut or from the area. And, we really took advantage of that loophole. Going forward, do I know if it's going to be as prominent? It may not be, and not so much the fact that that there won't be players of that caliber in Division III. I just think a lot of those kids, that when they end up going to a school like Wheaton or Endicott or Middlebury or any school like that, they want to get their degree from that school. So I think a lot of these guys are probably going to, just like a lot of Ivy League kids, they're probably going to finish out their careers there. But I think it also says really, it's a statement on how good college baseball is. I've talked to coaches, up and down, and especially at some of the bigger schools. I'm like, I think sometimes we kind of, we put our nose up to other schools because we're Division I. You go to a JUCO showcase. I go to one in Washington and one in 2 in California every year. The level of play is not that much lower. It's not. You go to a D3 tournament, which I was able to go to the Little East tournament a couple times over the past couple of years. Those teams are not that much lower than us. Now, depth-wise, it might be a little bit different, but the high level of that play is really good. And that when these guys go off to summer ball and you're looking at the all-star teams, and they're not all kids from North Carolina, Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, Clemson. They're kids from, like you said, they're kids from Central. There's going to be a kid from Wesleyan. There's going to be, a kid from Springfield, all mixed in, amongst, the rest of them. So I think sometimes we try to fool ourselves that we're coaching at this level that's so incredibly higher than the rest, and it just isn't.
I'd love for us to kind of discuss, and you and I were talking before we came on air here, is the reality of these, the now roster cap that's sending, Chicken Little, the sky is falling. But in reality, that 34 number is really no different than pre-COVID when the numbers were 35 and you had 40, kind of hanging in the middle there, 4 or 5 athletes that might have been injured or had academic issues, et cetera. But this is not going to be any different. The 27-man travel with the 34 cap. Can you talk a little bit about, some of the settlement issues and how you're navigating them at University of Connecticut?
Yeah, I mean, we just kind of went back into, like you said, like it's like it was pre-COVID. I mean, we make like it was like 40 years ago. It wasn't. Like we all had these rules, and then the COVID rules came in because, it wasn't fair that these kids had their years taken. And then all of a sudden there was all these other complications with the COVID rules. D3, junior college, D2 is getting crazy extra years. And all of a sudden we had real roster issues in terms of we had a surplus of players. Now it's like, okay, so we got to go back to 34. I don't think it's prudent to have 34 straight out in the fall, because like you said, if you do come across a wave of injuries or kids play summer ball, it'd be very difficult to practice and develop in the fall. So I do think you probably got to go to a 38, 39. I also think I think it's good to have competition at all times. I think it's good for kids to know that they can't slack off and still have a jersey come springtime. I think that there is good internal motivation that way. So I think you're gonna have 38, 39 guys. Going to have to get to a number, I guess, by December 1st, which it's a little different than the February number, but not too much. I think the only major difference between now and pre-COVID is that now obviously the portal is bigger. It's a major way that many of us recruit. So like what we've done at UConn, we have pulled back our numbers for high schoolers, and we have become. I don't want to say we've become like stricter, but you certainly want to be a little bit more critical because I don't know if there's a college coach out there that wants to cut guys. You hear these stories of, and I'm sure some of them are true, of guys recruiting guys so they don't go to a team in their conference, even though they don't really like them, and then come. Maybe those things are happening, but I think most coaches would tell you, listen, it's the worst day of the year when you have to cut a kid. It's terrible. None of us like it. None of us look forward to it. It's necessary in our job. So you want to bring kids in that can really fight, have a chance to fight their way onto the roster. If most of the guys on our team are going to be, let's say, juniors or above, which used to not be the case. People need to understand, like, most of your team used to be younger. You'd have 12 freshmen, you'd have 9 sophomores, and then, obviously you'd have lesser upperclassmen, either because attrition as they went through the program or because they got drafted. Well, now it's kind of it's the inverse of that. So we have the way we've kind of gone about it is that we're still going to try to get to our 14, 15 number in terms of recruiting. But instead of it being like 10 high school kids, 5 to 6 transfers, it's probably going to be the other way. It's going to be 10 transfers, probably 6 high school kids, because, again, those high school kids, they got to have a chance to really fight now, because of the portal too. You want to bring in kids that are talented enough, because if they feel like they're 2-3 years away, they're going to leave. They're not going to want to listen about, hey, you got to get stronger in the weight room. We're going to redshirt you your first year. You're going to be a backup your second year. It's really difficult for those kids to do that when they know, well, if I just go over to, a school down the road that I know my buddy's on and he's second baseman, well, I'm going to go there, right? So, you want to bring kids in that are talented enough that they can really try to fight their way onto the field their freshman year, or at least see an opportunity of playing time early in their career, or they're leaving. The other flip side to it is if you bring yourself a freshman that's really good and he's great and he plays, he might be leaving too. So that's the other reason why you don't want to have so many freshmen. Typically the older guys, if you have sophomores or above, they're going to stay.
Right.
So
I have to ask these questions because, I want parents to understand. Just Google University of Connecticut and drafted pitchers. I will promise you that UConn does a tremendous job at pitching development. And so I have to ask, parents need to hear from college coaches about throwing off of a mound 12 months a year, trying to, get into the velo world where you're amping up from, say, November through March here in New England with weighted balls and all kinds of stuff. Talk about pitching development at University of Connecticut. What are some of the things that you are looking for in your pitching staff, but also talk about your training methods at UConn with regard to, do you take time off? Do you put the ball down? Those types of topics.
Yeah, I'll start off with the first one. We do put the ball down. I think every guy on our team tends to have anywhere between a 4 to 6 week, what we call a shutdown period. Now, we do leave the option. Some guys just hate the idea of just not throwing a baseball for 4 to 6 weeks. But if they are going to throw, we're talking, 60 to 90 feet, no real emphasis on throwing the ball hard. Really a time of the year where they could really focus on, getting stronger, becoming more explosive, and some of those things. If you're pitching during that, you could really, you could be burning the candle almost at two ends. Right. In terms of some of the things that we have, we have this thing called Arm Care. It's a program that really it focuses on a few distinct muscle and strength areas that the arm, in terms of pitching, it really kind of tracks kind of where your arm strength is, and it's been able to kind of eliminate, well, not totally, but in a lot of ways, it's been able to eliminate that area where a guy his arm doesn't feel bad and it's not in pain, so he throws and he blows out because it's weak. It's really difficult sometimes for pitchers because as long as it's not in pain, they're going to go. Right. A competitor is going to go. So this kind of takes away some of those moments. They have to go. They do their arm care test. It basically gives them, hey, here's how strong your arm is at. And it takes the data every single day. So it kind of gives them a real up to date sort of reading on where their arm strength is at. So we use that pretty well. That's been revolutionary to me because it not only has to help these guys, stay healthy and get on the mound, but it's helped them pitch more. We have found that some guys throw 20 to 30 pitches and they're down for 3 to 4 days. You have other guys where, we were playing Seton Hall last year. The coach was like, man, you'll let your guys throw 120 pitches. And I'm showing them, I'm like, listen, we got this arm care thing where they're like, listen, they'll throw 110, 115 pitches and their arm scores aren't even going down the next day. They're in such good shape. So that was the thing that when we bought it, the guys there were like, listen, we don't even think the pro teams are using it correctly. You're going to be able to get more innings out of your best guys as long as their arms are in shape and you don't push them. So that is one that's probably been the biggest tool that we have. But in terms of like what we look for, I don't know. I'm sure guys have gotten on here, but I will say over the last 10 years, we have had more guys, for whatever reason, more guys that could throw really hard, have really fantastic stuff, and they don't pitch. It's either they can't be quicker than 1.7, 1.8 to home plate, or when a guy gets in there, they can't get in the box. I even did a lesson, this fall where I didn't even ask him to throw hard. I said, hey, you got 20 pitches, fastballs. How many can you get in the box? I want you to get at least 12 to 14. And guys had a hard time with that because this training is so velo and stuff emphasized that these guys have a really hard time when you start to put like the actual rules of the games in play. Like I'm like, guys, like you can throw 96, but if it's not a strike, guys, they're not going to swing at it. They're not going to swing at it. They're going to be in advantage counts. And, so for us, I'm still looking for a guy that can pitch and hit his spots and understands when to add and subtract and understands, how to hold on a runner and how to field his position. Those guys, they're going to play on our team. I mean, the guys that pitch on our team are guys that can do that. And this year, what we did in the fall to kind of really hammer this down is that, all these coaches now they want to throw away ERA and WHIP and all these, what they call them dinosaur statistics. Right, fine, right. That's fine. But I took the new statistics outside of inverted break, and I said, who gets first pitch strikes, who gets 2 out of 3 strikes in the first 3 at bats. So it's either a positive outcome or 2 out of 3 strikes within the first 3 at bats. Who has the lowest batting average against runners in scoring position? I thought that was more of, how do you kind of judge, testicular fortitude? Who can make a pitch when you need to?
Yep.
And I think the other one was maybe just straight up batting average against something like that. And all the guys that could throw strikes, that could get ahead, that could make pitches with runners in scoring position, they were all like, it was like 9 of the top 10 in ERA. It was 9 of the top 10 in strikeouts per 9. It was 9 of the top 10 in walks against. So my point to the guys was like, listen, you guys want to throw these statistics away because, you don't think they help you. When you even use the newer age statistics, it all comes down to throwing strikes. It all comes down to making pitches when you need to. So that for me, that's not going to change. I don't care, again, what your inverted break is, what your horizontal break is. It's all fun. It's all stuff that guys can dream on. But, the guys that are going to be pitching games with the chips on the line are guys that when I ask for a fastball away, you could throw a fastball away. When I ask for a curveball down, you could throw a curveball down. And if you can't do those things, I don't give a shit. Well,
that's okay. That's okay.
I don't care if I don't care that you have the best inverted break on the team or the best spin rate.
Well, I think that is an absolute on point. Parents need to hear that. Pitchers need to hear that. And I want to just kind of add one more to that because you use a term that I love that we don't hear enough, which is add and subtract. And I just would love for you to discuss the power of a pitcher that has a changeup, meaning there's 8 to 10 miles an hour of separation. So I would love for you to be able to tell parents, that Keith Folk kind of mindset of, hey, I can throw 92, but I can also throw 82. They both look the same. Talk about the power of having a changeup as a pitcher in college baseball.
It's funny that you say that because the longer that we go on in terms of coaching with this is when I first started coaching, I didn't like the changeup, and this is because I was a breaking ball guy, so I was a breaking ball guy. I want big hammers and sharp sliders, because I feel like that's the pitch that you could tell a hitter's coming and they're not going to be able to hit it. Most guys don't like spin. Well, what I did not realize because I was young and stupid and foolish is that I wasn't, watching what I call thumbers. Now, I wasn't a thumber growing up. I was a max effort guy. But when you watch a thumber, for people that don't know, a thumber was typically a lefty. Most likely, it was a lefty that didn't throw very hard, and he would throw hanging breaking balls and change ups and balls in there, and they were the kind of guy that nobody really liked. Nobody was really scared of. But you'd look up there and be 6 innings, and there'd be 1 run on the board, and there'd be a bunch of pop ups and weak ground outs and guys slamming bats. And as I've gone on in this, and we had a kid recently on our team by the name of Garrett Coe, who he's 86. He was 86 to 88 for us most days. He had a really good changeup. He was what I call effectively wild. He was really tough. Testicular 42. Always seemed like he made the pitch when he absolutely needed to. But he had a good changeup. And, our hitting coach says it all the time. You get a guy with a good changeup, it can ruin the entire day because it takes a guy's aggressiveness off the fastball. Because it messes with them so much that it takes it off the fastball. And when we went out to Oklahoma, and we played Oklahoma, I was trying to watch some video on them, and they were so good. I mean, that lineup was so incredible, and it was called chaos ball because they didn't just, they didn't have, it's a big park. They weren't going to beat you with, 4 or 5 home runs in a game. The way they beat you was with hitting them runs and stealing and all this stuff. All their guys were batting above 300, and a lot of them had 20 or so bases. But what I noticed is that if you were a guy with a breaking ball or slider, they just took it away. They would hit it. They would hit the first one they saw. They wouldn't try to pull it. And I went to Stephen Quigley, who was one of the starters in that game, whose changeup is his 3rd best pitch, and it's a pitch that I think he threw less than 10% of the time. And I went to Gabe Van Emmen, who was a lefty who was really trying to figure it out that last year and kind of found it right around towards the end. And I don't know if he was super confident with it at the time. I said, listen, if we go up there with the fastball slider idea, they're going to kill us. They're going to kill us. They kill everybody that they take away your plan A. But I said, I think if you go to plan B, I think these guys are going to have a really hard time. And luckily for us, it turned out to be true. These guys were first pitch swinging at changeups and letting fastballs go by at times. And again, I think the changeup is such an equalizer. And again, it's a pitch that's really difficult for the guys with facilities at home to really earn money off of, because it's not hard to do that with your sliders and your sweepers. Those are easy. You could get more break on them. You could throw them harder. A changeup really is, again, like if that thing can look like a fastball, and it doesn't really matter so much drop and stuff it gets. It's just a pitch that it's really difficult for these guys to really monetize. So I think, again, I think it's probably another reason why the guys that can do it now, it's becoming rare. But yeah, most of our guys, especially the guys that returned after, I think, seeing sort of the strides that certain guys on our team made with their changeup, in terms of, a guy like Gabe Van Emmen who went and was a Cape All-Star because of it. I think it's going to be a pitch, at least for our team, that's a little bit more in vogue this year than it was in prior years.
Well, Josh, I want to say thank you. I know this is an extremely busy time of year. I love everything about UConn baseball. I think Coach Penders and yourself and the entire staff at UConn does a thorough, completely polished program, not only for New England, but the country. Parents, I'm going to have all of the contact information for not only Coach MacDonald, but the UConn baseball program. You can find it in the Baseball Blue Book. Encourage you to download that app. It's free. Brand new, all recently renovated in the Google and Apple Play app stores. Look up UConn. Look up their schedule for 2025. I think you'll be blown away. But Josh, thank you so very much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having me.